Well, hello.
Hello.
How you guys doing today?
Pretty good, you?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. Everything's okay. We're
I'm
getting
doing
ready to talk
good.
about we're getting ready to talk about I think one of the best Star Wars movies ever. Uh,
Agreed.
um, so welcome to the Rogue Council, where we are getting ready to talk about Rogue One, the first a Star Wars story, um, which I have been since we started doing this. I think this is like one of my most anticipated things to talk about. Because I genuinely love this movie. But before we get carried away with talking about Rogue One, who are you and where can we find you? Roddy, where can we find you?
You can find me on YouTube at Higo27. There will be um, an avatar picture, profile picture of Wolf from Sekiro Shadows Die Twice underwater.
Nice.
There are multiple Higo27s, but Higo27 on YouTube.
Awesome. And David, where can we find you on the internet?
I am Xanatos1138 on pretty much everything, primarily TikTok.
Awesome. Yeah, I am pretty much the same thing, Forward into the Black, pretty much everywhere. I always feel weird. I'm like, where can we find you? And I'm like, hey, where are you right now? Disclose your location. Uh, but yeah, so we're talking about Rogue One, and one of the questions I thought maybe we would start this off with was the Battle of Scarif. I think is one of like the most pivotal moments of not only this movie, but I think of the franchise, and I think it's just a cool battle scene. And I'm just curious, what is your favorite battle scene? And that could be the movies, the TV shows, the books, the comics. Like, what is your favorite like full on battle? Uh,
Mine is Scarif.
Scarif? Okay, that's fair.
Yeah,
It's so
I'm
good.
pretty simple about it. But two main things I guess would be the blue shield is super cool, like
Mhm.
the plasma shield thing, and also just the whole overall context of
Mhm.
risk reward going on.
Yeah, yeah. David, what's your favorite battle?
I thought about it, and I think the Battle of Endor only mainly because you pretty much have every single type of battle from Star Wars in one large sequence.
Mhm. I would yes, I would also say the Battle of Endor, but specifically the battle over Endor is my favorite. I think the space battle over Endor. I'm not the big. We'll get into this in 3 episodes from now. I'm not the biggest fan of the battle on Endor. Uh, I love the battle on the Death Star, the second Death Star, the mental and psychological battle that's going on the Death Star. I love that. Forest, it's not my favorite. But the battle over Endor is like anytime I watch that, I've watched like the super cuts on YouTube of like just the Battle of Endor in space, and it's like I'm like, oh, so good. Darth Man, thank you for joining in. Says the Battle of Mandalore. That's a really good answer. That is a really really good part. I would say the Battle of Mandalore is definitely up there, and as someone who's recently watched the Clone Wars for the first time, I
Yeah,
agree. It's really
very
good.
with Bo-Katan and Maul and all that. Very good.
Yeah, just that whole final arc of the Clone Wars is so good, so heartbreaking,
Mm.
but yeah, super good. But kind of starting out into Rogue One. How so? This was the first standalone movie we had gotten, outside of the holiday special, basically, um, which is hard to top if we're being real. How did you guys feel about it when it first came out, like leading up to Rogue One and then going to see Rogue One and like your opinion like after that? What was that like for you guys?
Well, I went into it not really expecting much because it was like a new thing. I had low expectations. I'm like, well, this is probably just like a side story or whatever.
Mhm.
And like certain parts, I nearly flew out of my chair, and I left the theater going, did I actually like this better than Episode 7? Like I was shocked, but it was a very good shock.
Mhm. Roddy,
I
how
was
was? Did we watch this together?
Yeah, we actually
Okay.
did. Um, yes, in 2016 after playing music, I think. But my experience was very honestly fulfilled. I think it's been the most. Um, I got everything I needed and didn't really
Mm-hmm.
expect to, in a Star Wars situation,
Mm-hmm.
aside maybe Plagueis and Clone Wars. But in
Yeah.
terms of the films, it was great.
Yeah.
I didn't expect much, and I honestly had low expectations, as I do with most media, so I don't
Mm-hmm.
let myself down. So I was actually very joyful with the outcome.
Yeah. I mean, I distinctly remember like coming off of the hype train of The Force Awakens, the lead up to Force Awakens and then the hype of like all the theory crafting going around, like who's Snoke, who's Rey, who are all these characters, what's going to happen with Finn? Is Finn going to become a Jedi? Is Rey going to become a Jedi? And then all of a sudden we see who is this Jyn Erso? Oh, this is the story of how they got the Death Star plans. And it was like, oh, how are they going to do this? I remember people saying like, well, they like one of the promotions was like Jin in the Imperial armor and like, oh, is she gonna leave the rebellion type deal? I remember all that stuff, and I was blown away with this movie. I was just saying in the TikTok live I was in, I went to see The Force Awakens I think almost a dozen times in the theater, um, and Rogue One I saw a handful of times, but yeah, I was like, this was I wasn't even so much this was better than The Force Awakens. I was like, was this better? Was this the best Star Wars
Yeah,
movie?
yeah,
Did like they just top themselves like for everything?
right.
Um, and this was still like I think what's so crazy with Rogue One is this was still during prequel hate. Like prequel hate hadn't disappeared yet. It wasn't really until Last Jedi that we got the prequel appreciation kind of showing its head. So this was like I remember people saying like, oh, first First Awakens and then Rogue One. Like they like Disney knows what they're doing. Fast forward, for a couple of years. Uh, but yeah.
Yeah, I also thought it was interesting. I found a fact that the Clone Wars animated cartoon, one of the people working on that, who ended
Mhm,
up, I think, writing or directing Rogue One, had this idea during Revenge of the Sith. And when Disney bought um, Star Wars,
mhm,
they couldn't help but seize the opportunity and pitch the idea.
yeah,
And so this is built on hope, like the context of the movie. It's
mhm,
pretty cool. And
yeah,
chance. It's pretty interesting.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, before I'll ask one more question before we dive straight into it. Is like, how do you feel about the Star Wars story? Because we did do Solo before this, and we've gotten Rogue One. We don't really have anything outside of Rogue Squadron, which is maybe coming out next year, but most likely not. But we've gotten also a lot of TV shows. We've gotten 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, the final Clone Wars season, and we've gotten Book of Boba Fett, and in 3 weeks we get Kenobi. So, do you guys want more Star Wars stories, or do you want to keep forward with the TV show formula?
I I like the format of a Star Wars story specifically because I think that moving away from the crawl in the beginning gives the creator of the film kind of creative freedom in how they present the beginning.
Hmm.
Because with both Rogue One and Solo, it was slightly different.
Yep. Yeah, and I like that self-contained story that and I think it's something that Rogue One does really successfully, and we'll jump into it. But like it tells a very complete story in 2 hours. And also, Darthman says, "I have not seen this one yet. Happy Star Wars Week. I find your lack of eighth disturbing." um, but yeah, let's jump into it, and we'll break this up into acts. We're not going to go scene by scene. We're just going to kind of go into the plot points and a lot of the big characters. But we kind of start off being introduced to the Ursos. We are introduced to Galen, Jin, and Lyra Urso, who we've never heard of before. These are brand new characters, and they're basically working on a farm. And we then are met with the villain of the story, Orson Krennic, director Orson Krennic. And there is a whole bunch of stuff that goes down, and this is the kind of the trauma start for Jin Urso, who will be the main protagonist, with basically the Empire slaughtering the Earth, like slaughtering, Lyra, and then taking Galen essentially hostage. This reminds me of the first scene of Inglorious Bastards, um, of like showing up and like that friendly, like, oh, Galen, it's so good to see you. Oh, I'm so sorry about Lyra. Search the house. Like
Yeah.
it is this like very tyrannical move. Um, and then we're obviously met with Jin hiding, and Saw Gerrera comes and finds her. And we do see the call go out to Saw Gerrera. And again, me not being a Clone Wars person, I thought Saw Gerrera was an original character for Rogue One. And watching the Onderon arc in the Clone Wars, I was like, oh, he's a thing before Rogue One. And the Onderon arc is one of my favorite arcs. I really like the Onderon arc.
Yeah, it's very good.
Yeah, how do you guys feel about like backstory being added into Star Wars with characters like Galen Orso? Like basically, we have essentially the full story in A New Hope of like the rebels stole the plans for the Death Star and they went after the Death Star. How do we feel about this? Like, let's take this really small, kind of like even like with the Clone Wars, if it's just a line in a movie and we extrapolate on that. Like, do you want to see more of that? Do you like it? Do you think it's? I know some people think it's like people make fun of it because it's like they'll say like, oh, the next Star Wars story will be about like the guy in the corner of the cantina, and they'll do a whole season on nobody. But yeah, like, how do you guys feel?
I like just filling as many gaps as possible. Just
Okay.
give me all of the Star Wars knowledge, all of it connecting together. I love cohesive universes.
I agree. I mean, I think that any amount of information, especially in a fandom or a universe that I like, you know,
Yeah.
Mhm.
explained in depth more, is just better all around. And I think the only time it's not great is just going to be something, for instance, like Mandalorian. I'm not super invested in Mandalorian, but I really like Boba. I really like Rogue One, and am I going to cry about something they keep doing that I don't prefer? No. So I'm all for it though because it's just more substance.
Yeah, I like it, and I do like the backstory being added, and I like it when they take that backstory exactly how they did with Rogue One. It wasn't about Luke Skywalker. It wasn't about Han Solo. It was about this person you've never heard of that was so pivotal, um, that you just get a completely new perspective on it. And also, what's up, Kai? Thanks for hopping in. I do appreciate it. But yeah, so we move on in the movie, and we're met with our other lead character. We meet Cassian Andor, who has a show coming up this year, which is going to be I'm really, really excited for Andor. And what I love about Cassian is we see that the rebellion isn't perfect, because in the original trilogy, the rebellion can essentially do no wrong. They're just they're slapped around like a little bit by the Empire, but like at the end of the day, it's full of the best people you could think of. You have Luke, Han, and Leia. Han being maybe the person that is the rogue type, but he still, like, even in the first movie, he comes back and saves the day. We have Lando, who saves the day. We have Mon Mothma. We have Admiral Akbar. All these great stand-up characters, and then we get introduced to Cassian, who, like, basically the first time we see him, he just shoots his ally because he's like, you're going to slow me down. You're going to get me caught by the Empire. And I think this echoes the failures of the Republic already creeping its way into the Alliance, because this is what they're doing. This is what they have to do. And I do want to, like, point out the Ring of Kafrene or Kafrene, the trading depot inside of the asteroid. That thing is so cool. I would live there.
Yeah, it is very awesome. I would like to see more content there. I have not myself, but it's so quick. It's so quick.
Yeah, it's this little B-roll establishment shot of like there is this whole city inside of an asteroid, and it feels very, very like deep sci-fi. Like this is not. It feels almost like alien to Star Wars to see something like this. But I think it's great. Um, and the one thing that kind of I have a question about with Cassian is we see what he's doing and we see how he's accomplishing his goals, and then we basically when we get back to meet the Alliance, he's captain, like he's important in the rebellion. Like, do you think at this point, is he worthy? I assume in Andor we're going to see more of this, but like it feels like he's like not supposed he should not be in this position based on what he's done at this point. Like, I don't know, how do you guys feel?
He's it. It really depends because he's always put in these morally difficult situations. It
Mhm.
seems like where he has to make that tough call, and we'll talk about later on. But he's always put, even by his higher ups, say, okay, no question, no leeway. You have to do it this way
Yeah.
because otherwise you put the rebellion at risk.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's that situation. Obviously, we're dealing with warfare,
Hmm.
physical warfare. So, like the sacrifices he'll have to make aren't uh, pretty, and I think he is worthy because he follows through with his orders. And at the end of the day, that's all someone with a command is supposed to do. And if it's a benevolent thing or an ambiguous thing like Cassian's doing, or you're Tarkin commanding people below. I mean, if you're following the rule, what you're told to do, I think in an order like the rebellion,
Hmm.
I think he's worthy. But as you know, we'll get to the later
Yeah.
parts. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Here,
so
here, I think he's worthy right here.
Yeah. So I think it's just interesting, like the contrast we're seeing of like some of the characters we've been introduced to before, like in the original trilogy and even in the prequel trilogy, of like stand up people like Obi-Wan Kenobi, and of course he would never shoot an ally in the back, but Cassian does, and I think
I,
it's
I
so
also I like that you asked this question because I actually thought this last night. I thought, did he just give him an easier death than what the stormtroopers and the Empire were going to do to him? And at
yeah.
the cost of like leaking some rebel intel too. I don't
Mhm.
know, but
He
but
might have shown him a mercy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Because
ugly
I
for
remember when
sure.
this movie came out, people were like, "Oh, Cassian's like not a good person," and like there's part of me that is like he's definitely following like the wrong path. Like he's doing it, following the wrong path for all the right reasons almost. And he's such an interesting character to me, and I really like him.
Well, yeah, it's
But
it's like he's showing Sith traits, and like the rebellion had to do some Sith tendencies
Mhm.
to be the good guys. It's
Yeah, they had
interesting.
to do messed up
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, so we go through that whole sequence, and Cassian escapes, and then we're reintroduced to Jyn Erso as an adult. Obviously, time has passed. Um, Jyn is one of my favorite characters of all time in Star Wars. She is the rebellion. She is the personification of the rebellion. She has a life that's so different from a lot of the Star Wars characters we've had thus far. Um, Even with the context of Solo, with Han Solo, like, oh yeah, Han Solo was in the Imperial army, but like just to get out of Corellia, whereas Jin was like born and raised in the Empire. Um, and we see like the flashbacks of her, on Coruscant, with Krennic and her father when she was super young, like from day one was in the Empire. And if you've read Catalyst, like you see how deep it goes, and having all of that taken away from her by the only thing she knew was the Empire, and that was all ripped away from, like, her life was ripped away from her by her own life essentially.
Mhm.
And uh she's taken away at a very young age by Saw, and then goes from all she knows is the Empire to all she knows is the rebellion. And she gets the extreme end of the rebellion with the partisans and Saw Gerrera. Um, and I think some of the interesting comparisons is Jin to Luke, because Luke starts out as a farm boy in a moisture farm on Tatooine, and like even in the deleted scenes, like maybe he's getting ready to go to the Imperial Academy, like he's getting ready to volunteer for the Empire, um, and I think it's so interesting to see how he ends up in the rebellion versus Jin's path to the rebellion, and how she like fully every ounce of her being encapsulates the rebellion to the point where she rebels against the rebellion.
Yeah, I mean her groveling as just a sufferer and a survivor
Mhm,
before the rebellion
mhm.
um, probably gave her some street skills to be able to do what she did in the
Yep.
movie. So
Yeah, and something that I to compare to another character is like what we're starting to see is something I feel like we didn't really see with Luke, but I think we definitely kind of saw it with Anakin. We saw it with Rey as well, where characters that kind of just where we meet them in their introduction, they're already skilled and capable and strong. Like Jin is incredibly capable from when as we meet her as an adult. And Anakin in the same way is very skilled, very reflexive, very talented. And then Rey, obviously being a scavenger her whole life, very skilled, very capable. And we're starting these characters off kind of like in the middle of the road, where we don't have to build upon them, they have been built. And I think that's really cool. But yeah, how do you I don't know, thoughts on Jin in general?
I liked her character a lot. I mean, I did get a lot of I mean background information from Catalyst,
Mhm.
and I'm reading Rebel Rising right now, where she's a kid with Saw, and it's like really interesting to get the outside details. But as far as just the movie, I was interested with her like immediately. Where I think one of the first things I thought when I first saw the movie, she's getting freed, and then her first instinct, even though it's people freeing her, she grabs a shovel and just wails on both of them and tries to
Yep.
run out.
Yep. She's completely used to being alone and not trusting anyone.
yep.
And she learned that from, being abandoned by the Empire and also from Saw. Um, and yeah, like no, you're right. Like just that we learned so much from her, and just like the brief like few moments that she's on screen for the first couple times. Roddy, I don't know. How do you feel about Jin?
Um, I love her character because she ultimately, you said in general, so in general and like totality, my opinion on her is she's the perfect uh archetype of trauma survival and how ugly and beautiful it is like simultaneously, you
Hmm.
know. And but I mean she's precise. She's sort of like Padme with her precision and with her mind, but like not so much at the beginning with her indifference. And I think that all her traits are something very new in Star Wars, but very Star Wars, like you
Yeah,
said, very rebel. Like she's the embodiment of a rebel. And I'll say to end the statement that I love her contrast with Cassian when
yeah.
they're talking about hope and stuff, and that's obviously next.
Hmm. But yeah, basically we kind of go from here, where they are basically sent on a mission to find Saw Gerrera, and they go to Jeddah City, which I think is a really cool looking city. It's just this like city built on a plateau, um, uh, and basically you hear. I think it's really interesting because you hear like the alliance, like the higher ups of the alliance, refer to Saw Gerrera and the partisans as extremists. When fast forward into A New Hope, they go to very extreme measures to get certain things done.
Yeah,
And so it's very interesting to see this evolution of like it feels very much like Mon Mothma and Bail Organa from the prequels are leading the alliance, and they have not had the rebellion kick into it yet. And this is also where we meet Chirrut and Baze, which are two of my favorite characters within the movie. I love Chirrut, and I love the contrast between these two characters and how attached they are. And but like how they constantly mess with each other, and you can tell right away how much each one of them means to the other.
Mhm.
Um, and it's, we see this very insightful person out of Chirrut, and we see this kind of sarcastic, like very intimidating presence of like, yeah, all that's nonsense. I'm just gonna have a big gun on me at all times. That's gonna solve all my problems, but I will never abandon my friend who's like the religious wacko. Uh, so they're what they symbolize so many things, and I think we can get into a lot of that stuff later. But Chirrut and Baze, like their introduction and their involvement in the Battle of Jeddah, is so good.
Yeah, introduction is possibly one of the best introductions in all history. I don't know.
You find out so much about both of them just in that sequence of them being introduced and helping with the
Yep.
stormtroopers, and then afterwards when they're kind of talking back and forth to each other. You almost shot me. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like even when he's just talking to Jen and he's talking about the Kyber crystal on her neck, like you get who this character is very quickly, um, and and as they just evolve throughout the movie, they get better and better as the movie goes along. Um, but then we kind of meet the Imperial pilot that is being talked about over and over. There's this Imperial pilot that is defected, and he has information about Galen Erso, who has since been abducted, has been working on the Death Star for the Empire. And he meets Saw Gerrera. Well, first he meets Saw's rebels, and he thinks that that's Saw Gerrera. It's not. But then when he finally meets Saw Gerrera, he says, "We're going to bring you to the Boar Gullet," which is a big, scary tentacle monster that reads your mind and then destroys it. Uh, and it's something that I noticed, like while I was watching this again today, is how much of like the sequels and the Star Wars story movies are really just these very long love letters to the expanded universe of like this is not a George Lucas thing at all. Like
Mhm.
the tentacle monster that destroys your mind and then figures out what's inside it at the same time. That's not George Lucas. That is all of the expanded universe comic book writers. um,
That's cool.
yeah, I I think it's cool. I think the Borgullet is kind of terrifying. Like for this type of movie, it is like an almost a horror aspect to it that shows up briefly.
Mm.
Um, but then we get the crew with Cassian and Jin, and we've also met at this point. We've met K2SO, who is maybe one of the best droids. Alan Tudyk does such a good job as K2SO, and his one-liners, his quips, are so good. Um, uh, when Jin shoots the other Imperial droid, and he's like, "Did you know that wasn't me?"
There's little gems in this too, like that slap when he slaps Cassian in the face. That was improvised. That was totally
Oh yeah.
on off.
Oh,
That
and
was
Alan
totally off
did
the
that
cuff.
like in the filming. Yep.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, he's such a cool character. But then they are obviously captured. We do get a great one-liner from Chirrut as they're putting all the bags, and he's like, "Are you kidding me? I'm blind." Um, and so they are brought to Saw Gerrera's hideout, which is away from Jeddah City. Um, and Jin meets with Saw Gerrera, and I think this was the moment uh, when the movie really sold itself to me when I was watching it for the first time. Is like it was definitely for me the first time I watched it. It was like, this is great. This is the original trilogy back at it again. It's the X-wings and the TIE fighters. We're seeing regular stormtroopers. We were getting glimpses of the Death Star being finalized. Like, yeah, okay, this is great. But I think the interaction with Jin and Saw, and you can tell they haven't seen each other in a long time. And he Saw's like, "You came here to kill me, didn't you? After all these years, the rebellion has sent you to kill me." And he's just being paranoid at this point. But then the hologram of Galen Erso and Jin's reaction. to that hologram, and it was one of those things I remember seeing, like when The Force Awakens came out, like, oh, we're finally getting proper emotion out of actors
Mm.
in Star Wars with The Force Awakens, but I think Rogue One throughout the entire movie elevated that, and I don't think it has been topped. I think, like, even just Jin falling to her knees once the transmission ends, and it's not like she's upset. You know, she's facing like basically every emotion she could possibly feel at that time, and it's just like when that whole sequence went down, I was like, this is an amazing movie. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and the ceiling starts crumbling in the middle
Yeah.
of the transmission, all that.
Yep, the Death Star has been fired on Jeddah at this point,
I think it's
and
interesting how Saw and Jin have similar distrust of like pretty much anything that's
yeah,
unknown,
hmm
like outside of their current knowledge, and it
and
just like sort of locks them in
yeah,
similar ways.
I haven't read Rebel Rising, but I can only assume like she's like that because of Saw.
Yeah, he practically raised. Well, I don't know how old she was when he picked her
She's
up.
like uh, based on Catalyst, she would be 8 or 9.
Yeah,
Um,
she was like 8 or 9, and I'm only like 60 pages into Rebel Rising, but he it basically makes it clear that Saw has no idea how to parent, so he just trains
Mm,
her to be a soldier from day one.
yeah. Well, yeah. Even if she's had 8 years of development, that's still going to impact her a lot.
mhm, Yep. But yeah, I mean, it's great. You said like the ceiling, like basically the Death Star has been fired for the very first time
Mhm.
on Jeddah City, and I think just like props to the special effects team that did the explosion for Jeddah City, and how immense it feels and how devastating it really just like it's just like
Oh
this
yeah,
is bad,
yeah.
and it's like
There's no horizon.
yeah, we have a problem on the horizon. There
There's
is
no,
none.
A wave of planet.
Yeah,
and while all that's going on, Krennic is up there going, "Oh, it's beautiful. It's
yeah.
great."
Krennic, to me, Krennic is like my least favorite villain because he's so good at
Hmm.
being a villain. Like it's just like you hate him. Every moment he's on screen, you're like, I can't stand you. You're awful. You're the
That's what makes
worst.
it such a good ending because it
Yeah.
eliminates his
Oh,
weakness.
we'll get to
You
that
know?
because
Yeah.
that is the cherry
Yeah.
on top of all
I'm
movies.
trying not to say that, but I wanted to.
Um, but yeah, this is such a great moment. The special effects in this is great, and this is the end of Saw Gerrera. Um, and he has popped up in so many pieces of Star Wars media since his inception, and this is an interesting way to see his end. But um, everyone kind of as Jeddah, and again, this is like the test where they just blow up a city; they don't blow up the planet, and we know what happens with Alderaan and how quickly it destroys Alderaan. But it's so interesting to see like this little devastating little pop of a laser, and they all scramble to what is definitely the most underrated ship of all Star Wars now is the U-wing.
Hmm.
That thing is so cool. But they all get in there and they all kind of fly back. They're going to fly. They light speed jump right out of the dust cloud. Um, and we kind of see like as they're getting back, they're going back to Yavin basically, and we see that this has affected everyone in one way or the other. And I want to like if you have anything to talk about on this, because I think seeing how Chirrut deals with this, how Baze deals with this, how Jin deals with this, and how Cassian is dealing with this, as well as Bodhi, like they all have a different reaction to what has just happened. Like they just saw something that has never been seen before. Like, oh, this is what they were scared of, is this weapon that like you see what happened, and it's just like
Yeah,
everyone's kind of freaking out.
each one has a different perspective. Like Jin just saw her father's message. She's recovering from that on top of seeing the planetary devastation. Bodhi is seeing what he was sent there to warn them about. Like he's seeing it live and in person. And Chirrut and Baze are seeing their home obliterated,
Hmm
like just atomized.
Yeah. and I think Cassian, he's trying to hold it together as like he's the impromptu leader, but it's just like he's now realizing like we may not win this,
Hmm.
and it's just I love that scene in the U-wing when they're heading back to Yavin, and it's all like this is bad.
Mhm.
This is really bad.
Yeah, and I think going future pacing into the film, but it starts here. Like it starts setting in, yes, the tragedy, yes, the seriousness, but also that I think, I mean, sort of obviously amplifies their motivation and their willpower,
Mhm.
and it's
Yeah,
like it's bleak, but they transmute that into something good for
yeah,
their cause. It's so cool.
for sure. Yeah, I love the resolve that comes out of this whole scene, and the destruction of Jeddah is like such a like intimidating sequence. But yeah, that's kind of like the end of the first act of the film, and then it kind of transitions into the next act. David, if you wanna.
Yeah. So starting off with Krennic versus Tarkin and like their motivations and the two different ways that they viewed the Death Star, I think it's a it's kind of a typical rivalry between Imperial officers that we see so often.
Mhm.
Like they're both competing for that right hand man spot beside the Emperor and Darth Vader,
Yep.
and Tarkin is constantly undercutting Krennic, and Krennic is clearly bad at the game. Like he keeps losing, so his response is just to be snarky and violent at times, like with Galen slaps him in the face and then shoots all the engineers in front of him, type of
Mhm.
stuff. What do you guys think about all of like the comparison between the two?
I really like it. It's even going into the sequel trilogy when we see the rivalry of like Hux and Kylo. And again, you're right. It is the race to be second. Uh, like they will, Krennic and Tarkin will never be Darth Vader. They'll never be the Emperor. You know, Hux and Kylo will are fighting to be the second in command to Snoke, and even in the prequels, Maul and Grievous and Dooku, they all are scrambling to get to a place they'll never be. So yeah, I love that interaction, and I love just their chemistry, the bad chemistry, the intentionally bad chemistry. I love it.
Yeah, it illuminates Tarkin's. I'm so glad they did the CGI project. I'm
Mhm.
sorry if you didn't realize the CGI. I mean, it's sort of immersion breaking, but it's awesome because with Clone Wars, it did a little bit of this, but it really facilitates like who the heck this dude is in A New Hope and how cold in a negative way he is and
Mhm.
manipulative and conniving in a very proper and like articulate way. And it's just this twisted nature of Tarkin that I don't like, but I really like to observe. You
Mhm.
know,
Yeah,
it's really fun to observe them, like him, like sort of swat Krennic on the nose like a dog, and I'm like, this is such a mess. I don't like the Empire, but this is just like I like this, but I don't like it, but it's great. I mean, I think the dynamic is a good portrayal of Machiavellian narcissism that knows how to manipulate anyone. You
Mhm.
know,
Yeah,
it's like Palpatine, but take away all the Sith sorcery and
he's super clever, and I think David, you're right. Is you have Krennic who like just doesn't know how to play the game. He's like, I wouldn't say he's bad at his job. Like as far as like being director Krennic, I think he's fine.
yeah,
But being like the imperial officer he wants to be, he's so bad at it.
yeah. He would rather have his project and nobody try to compete with his spot. Like he
Mhm.
wants his pet project, and
yeah.
that
Yeah.
that's also why he gets so mad when Target's like, "All right, I'm just going to take it from you."
Well, that's the craziest part. Tarkin has what they showed in Clone Wars. Tarkin has loyalty to the whole mission of the Empire and the statism of the Empire and the grand plan of it. And like Krennic clearly just wants to feel important and
Hmm.
and I don't think Tarkin really oddly he seems fulfilled,
Yeah.
at least knows himself, so he just does what needs to be done. It's the weirdest thing to see.
And kind of like even adding the books into it, because there's the two James Luceno books that have come out with this would be Tarkin and Catalyst, which obviously Tarkin is obviously about Tarkin, and Catalyst is very much about Krennic and his
Mhm.
interactions with Galen Erso, and you do see just how different they are. And but it's I think Catalyst does a really good job of making Krennic be a really good villain and just a really just rotten scumbag overall. But and then Tarkin also is just like you do realize, like you said, he's so conniving, he's so ruthless. Um, but yeah, he is almost like the non-Sith Palpatine.
Yeah, it's so interesting.
So moving past that, when they're on their way to Edu, Cassian is updating like the rebel base, and it seems like he's hoping for the orders to change. Like he has this look on his face, like, oh, the order's still to kill Galen.
Yeah.
Like he looks really disappointed, but like he's the only one that knows it at this point. So there's all this tension because Jin is really excited, like I'm gonna go save my dad, like I'm gonna see my dad again, type of
Mhm.
stuff. And then um Edu itself, when they crash land, and um I forget the guy's name, but he's just like really quick to be like, all right, send X-wings, bomb the place.
Oh yeah, I can't. Yeah, he's like the one of the commanding officers on
Yeah.
Yavin. Yeah, he's got the domino patch.
And just everything coming together where Cassian is aiming but doesn't take the shot, and he like everyone kind of finds out in a because Chirrut senses it, and just that whole sequence. What do you guys think of Edu?
Edu's cool. It reminds me of the movie Armageddon.
Hmm.
When they're on the asteroid, that's when I watch this movie, that's all I think about is like when they crash land on the asteroid in Armageddon. That's what Edu looks like to me. I think it's a cool planet. Um, I love Chirrut's comment of like the the force shrouds itself in darkness around someone who's getting ready to kill. And I'm like, man, Chirrut's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the whole sequence. The main thing that stuck out to me last night was I don't know why I didn't ever notice it, but Cassian doesn't shoot because he realizes that Krennic is abusing people and like about to shoot Galen. And he's like,
Mhm.
wait a second, is Jin right? It's so funny, like I didn't put that together, but it's actually a very awesome sequence of an order follower like thinking for himself, observing accurately and being like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I think
Because
I
then
think
we get back to the ship and he's like, did I shoot? I didn't shoot, did I?
yeah.
Very
I,
cool sequence.
yeah, it's something I noticed is just the whole sequence of events on that platform when you basically have the engineers lining up in a firing squad, and it's like there's so many things that are happening that like it obviously it's like everything starts adding up. It's like the meme with all the calculations of his head. It's like,
Hmm.
wait, I'm supposed to be shooting that guy? Him? Not this guy?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really cool, and I think it's a really cool perspective through the scope. Like you don't hear any, like, he obviously can't hear anything going on, but
Mhm.
it just everything just kind of comes together for him. And then all the X-wings come.
Yeah, and then like he sees Jin, and he hears that the X-wings are coming. Is no, no, like he's got this unspoken connection to Jin throughout the entire movie,
Mhm.
and he's like, I need to protect Jin. I need to go after Jin. I need to like keep her safe.
Yeah, I like their dynamic a lot, and as it evolves throughout the movie, it's man, this movie's really good.
So after that, Krennic leaves to go to Vader's castle to make sure that he's still in charge, and to meet with Vader. And we see like we get our first sneak peek of Vader, I believe, out of the suit since episode 3. Like you see his head in the tank, and that
Mhm.
like weird disciple telling him that Krennic has arrived.
Yeah.
Um, Krennic is very presumptuous in this scene, and you do see a little bit of Anakin when he has that like dad joke pun, I think, what do you guys think of like Vader's characterization and Krennic throughout this sequence?
First of all, I want to say the little minion that gets Darth Vader is great. I love him. He's so cool. But yeah, I do love that like Krennic is going up to like Darth Vader, like even like fourth wall breaking Darth Vader. Like it's Darth Vader. You don't talk smack to Darth Vader, but it seems very obvious that even in universe, everyone should know you don't talk smack to Darth Vader, and he does it. Which props to Krennic in a way. But yeah,
Oh
no,
my god,
I think
that's funny.
I think the whole sequence with Krennic and Vader is you can almost hear like I don't want to say Hayden Christensen, but I can almost hear Matt Lanter coming through. Like the Clone Wars Anakin kind of coming through. And it's obviously not having seen the Clone Wars prior, it never really stuck with me. But Vader in this sequence feels like the Clone Wars Anakin is coming through, and is obviously very displeased with Krennic as a person in general, it seems. And then obviously, I love the dad joke. It gets a lot of hate, but I love
It's the best.
don't try to choke on your aspirations. I'm like, yeah, that's funny. But yeah, no,
To me, that dad joke to me is so deep because I
yeah,
mean, I hate to be that person all the time. I don't actually. Everyone chokes on their aspirations if they
yeah,
make them obsessions. And like the thing that's happening is Vader, this, we know him as little Annie and then angsty Anakin, like tragedy Anakin. Now Vader is literally scolding an Imperial officer with some massive truth, and like, yeah, force choking him not so cool, but yeah, don't choke on your aspirations. Once again, Krennic getting booped on the nose, and it's just so great. I love it.
yeah.
But yeah, props to Krennic, like you said.
What's so interesting is that how differently I think everything would have turned out in the Star Wars universe as a whole had Krennic just listened to what everyone said. Like if he would have just listened to Tarkin and been like, yeah, no, this project is bigger than my fame within the Empire, and if he would have listened to Vader of like, don't get caught up in this, don't let this get the best of you. If that hadn't happened, who know? Like Krennic knew there was a weak point. Krennic knew Galen put that weak point in there. Had he listened to everyone, he would have shut that weak point down.
True.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting how that played out.
Krennic ended up choking on a laser in the end.
Yeah. I love that part so much. It's like one. It's so subtle, but it's like one of my favorite parts of this movie.
Yeah, 100%.
But yeah, I think the only other thing I would say is I really like the ending of the platform with Jyn and Galen. It's so sad. This is like the first and last time she really gets to see her father. I'm always like, oh, I'm gonna cry like a baby during this.
Well, Galen really is. Wait, I mean, is he the New Hope? Let's really think about this. And it's like it's not even hope. It's like it's hope. Hope came to fruition because of his genius and planning, and that's like the coolest dynamic with Galen. So that moment transferred, I think, was a transference of, like in terms of the shifts happening and like what's motivating Jin to do and what he just finalized within his work. It's bringing that diligence and like scientific genius to that applicable willpower and hope that Jin brings to the rebellion. I think that's so cool, and it is very deep and emotional. And the rain, rain and the fires and all that. It's very good.
Have you read Catalyst?
Yeah, I only read it once though, and I
Yeah.
read it so long ago that it actually interestingly it's the only book lately that I felt like rereading, but I don't own
Mhm.
it anymore, so I'm gonna
I've
have to
I've
get
been
into it.
meaning I've been meaning to reread it because Galen's such a good guy. Like
Yes,
through and through because of that book. I mean, even in the movie, you can tell how like pure of heart he really is. And yeah, I think I don't know if I would classify him as like the new hope of the rebellion, but like, well, like the book is perfectly named. He's the catalyst of the rebellion. And I think that book is so perfectly named, and I think that's exactly what he is. Is the rebellion was nothing without Galen Urso, and they didn't even know. They tried to kill him, uh,
100%.
and they had no idea.
Yes, he is nothing but a catalyst. I mean, no
Yeah,
words
God,
sometimes, you know.
man, this movie's so good.
And Luceno, right? I mean, I'm just gonna go excitement and fanboy here, but Luceno writing Catalyst and the potency of this
Mhm.
film too. I mean, sometimes I every time I watch it, actually, I'm like, oh, this actually is real. But yeah, Galen is the catalyst. Jin carries it on.
Yeah, there's definitely even in like one of my favorite novels, Alphabet Squadron. There are characters that are deeply affected by Jin Urso. Like like there's characters that had met Jin Urso at one
Mm,
point, and they're like, it changed my life. Um, and yeah, so
that's
it's really
massive.
cool. Yeah, so there's lots of stuff that like Rogue One has tied into since it came out. But yeah, I mean that kind of closes out the second act of the film, and then like the last act is just
Cool.
like the Battle of Scarif, basically.
Yeah. uh, which is cool because it's my favorite battle. And it's Act Three. So the rebellion stands down. Yeah. So we move on to the council roundtable situation
Mhm.
with the defeated attitude of the alliance for the most part. I think uh, Mon Mothma's holding on, Bale's holding on, but we got Bail Organa's expressions very solemn. Uh, looking at from Jin to Mon to the not nihilists really, but they're giving up. You know, I understand, but don't do that, please. Cassian's extremist rebellion right after is interesting, but let's talk about the roundtable. What do you guys think about that? I think the whole shooting back and forth, the fire to give up, and then just the spurts of you know,
Mhm.
let's go fight. What do you guys think about all that?
I love this scene because we see this like fracture within the rebellion, and I think Mon Mothma only wants what's best for the alliance and for the galaxy at whole, and she's just like, I mean, it's an impossible like decision to make. Is it's like, do we trust this girl whose father was an imperial scientist? He basically built the Death Star. Are we supposed to believe that he put a weakness in? He put like you think about like, I mean, people joked for decades about how ridiculous it was that the Death Star could be blown up by this one little, if you shoot a missile in this little
Yeah,
hole, the whole thing explodes. Like, and I think that's so interesting that like they almost incorporate that into the movie of like, you expect us to believe that there is a little tiny exhaust port that if you shoot a missile and the whole moon-sized battle station explodes. No, we are not sending a strike team to go find these plants. So I think it's really interesting that she's trying her best to keep everything together, and I think Bail Organa is just like, there's almost a part that it looks like he's like, I know they're right, but I can't support it. And it's like, if we do this and it's wrong, we lose everything.
right. I mean, it's pretty much going into a boss battle. Video game terminology. Sorry if you don't play games. But boss fight. The buff that requires low health to get more damage. First time you ever try it, with no knowledge of what's going on.
Mhm.
And like that's exactly what it is. You just get the risk outweighs the reward. I think logically, 100,000
Mhm.
infinitesimal percent.
Yep.
What do you think, David?
Yeah, that whole scene, it was interesting because Mon Mothma is still treating it like the Senate floor. Like everyone has to be unanimously in agreement for us to send ships to fight.
Mhm.
And that's good, but it's also the same mistakes the Republic made.
Yeah.
I'm not saying go to a dictatorship, but find a happy medium
Yeah.
I
where
think it's
there's
like
like an executive decision can be made.
Yeah, I never thought about that where it was like you have Bale and Mon Mothma who are just old senators of the Republic and just like it's happening again.
Mhm.
It's but yeah, that's super interesting.
I think
I
that
never onto that.
yeah, I'm in agreement with Chase and you. Like I didn't think very deeply about this either, but honestly, I think with the situation that is unfolding in this scene, it's like I'm surprised Bale or Mon wasn't just like whoever wants to try, go for it, you know.
Yeah.
But you know, it's but then
Yeah.
they're then in their thought process, it's probably then you risk most of our fleet trying,
Yeah.
you know,
That's the
stuff like
scary
that.
part.
So organizing these types of things is really hard, and the
Mhm.
freedom
Yeah,
of opinion here is interesting, very interesting.
and at the same time, knowing what the Empire is capable of and what they've the lengths they've gone to deceive the rebels into a trap or something, like their caution is warranted at the same time. But it's also like a lot of fear ruling their decisions.
Yeah.
True.
I mean, it's it's one of those like put yourself in their shoes of it's like let's say we send you to Scarif and there's nothing there and you basically you've poked the hornet's nest at this point and the hornets have the biggest stinger you could possibly imagine. And where are they going to put that stinger? And that's the scary thing that you got to think is like we know what happened to Scarif. What else can this thing do? Can we take this thing down? And it's again, it's like the only opportunity they have. Um,
It's perfect to
mhm.
move the only opportunity, and then so with risky opportunity is typically viewed as extreme, right? So Cassian's extremist rebellion, they walk up um, behind Jin's feeling defeated and like actually hopeless, and he says, "Oh, I believe you." That's what he says, right? He goes, "I believe you."
Yeah.
With a
Mhm.
band of you know
Yeah,
dudes behind him, just ready to go to Scarif and boot up. And it's just that scene. Honestly, when I just said that, I realized it's actually probably the most impactful scene. Honestly, because it's that shift of Jin feeling betrayed by people she finally opened up to trust. She spoke her mind in front of I don't know, like dozens of strangers at least, and they're like, no, you know,
hmm
and she feels like, oh yeah, you know, I'm not gonna trust. Yeah, I was right before. I shouldn't trust people. And the Cassian's like, I believe you. You know,
Mhm.
yeah. And this
what
is
do you
like
guys think
this.
about the rebel Cassian's extreme rebellion?
I love it because I think this is like the shift, the pivotal moment, right? Of like they were talking about Saw Gerrera's extremist rebellion, and now there's a rebellion within the rebellion because they know that's the only way to move
Mm-hmm.
this forward. And you're right. I love when Cassian comes up with like the band of rebels behind him, like we're gonna fight with you. We're gonna do this. There's no other choice at this point. And it's like the first time we actually do see like Cassian trust Jin, like genuinely trust her, not just because she says earlier in the movie she says trust goes both ways. When she's got the blaster, and then K2 is like, "Oh, she gets a blaster." uh, do you want to know the odds that she'll use it against you? It's high. But no, like she says, trust goes both ways, and I think that line actually just comes full circle into this moment of like he finally does actually trust her, and is like, well, everyone is going to Scarif knowing the likelihood result of going to Scarif, and he's like, Jin's right, Galen was right, let's do this. And yeah, I love this scene, and I love them stealing the shuttle. It's so good. But yeah, I think that's you're right. I think it's such an important scene in on so many levels, and just like how everything changed like right then and there.
And
Also, you hear General Syndulla, please report
Yes.
over
Yes.
the intercom,
yeah,
and I'm like, yeah,
I'm glad you said that.
You see Chopper at the same time too, I think,
Yeah,
right?
he like scoots by, and then the ghost is like hanging out um, around there. And like,
I didn't know
yeah,
there was all that. I just knew that they
yeah,
sent Hera Syndulla over the comm. I need to
yep.
rewatch and watch sees Chopper
Chopper,
and
Chopper
the
kind of
Ghost.
like rolls by, and then there's like a kind of like a overhead shot, and like there's the ghost is in the corner.
Yeah, and I think yeah, it's so awesome. And Chase, did you write or David? Is the rebellion within the rebellion the shift we see that leads a New Hope and Luke Sky leads to New Hope and Luke Skywalker? I love that actually. Let me comment on that. A rebellion within rebellion because ultimately it's a whole collective of beings who want freedom and change, but they're at odds and pretty much solutionless aside from placing their willpower on risky odds, you know,
Hmm.
that they have to find clarity in. So,
Yep.
what do you guys think about that dynamic? I mean, that's awesome. That
I
sentence.
think that band of rebels is the start of it, and then Leia is the one that continues it.
Yes.
Like she is
I
the one
think
that
that.
continues it throughout the original trilogy. Like that same brand of hope and the way the rebellion operates from that point forward.
Yeah,
Right.
I think that's dead on. I think the rebellion that we have um, at this point is not doing anything that drastic. And I'm going through Rebels right now, which takes place before Rogue One.
Hmm.
Um, and there is a lot of hesitancy in a lot of the missions they take of like, should we really steal from the Empire today? Like that is like, what Kanan and Hera are often telling Sabine and Zeb and Ezra is like, I don't think this is a good idea. This is too dangerous. And it's just, in the great when we see what happens in A New Hope, like they went and blew up the Death Star, and they're like, oh, I don't know if we should steal gas from the Empire. So we see that, yeah, this is such a huge shift. This is the beginning of the rebellion that sends Rogue Squadron into the Death Star. Um, and so yeah, I think this is the Rebel Alliance that we know forming. Like, and I think what's cool is we do see this in Episode 3, and we see this a little bit in the Clone Wars TV show, is we do see the Rebel Alliance forming, with Padme and Bale kind of conspiring of like they basically are almost inseparable in Episode 3. And they know that there's a huge shift happening and that they have to do something about it. And there's a really good deleted scene for Episode 3 when they basically kind of pull Padme in and like, hey, like there's a big change coming and it's not good. We have to do something about it.
I
Uh,
really wish they had kept those scenes in too, because then
yeah.
her asking Anakin, "What if we're on the wrong side?" feels completely weird.
Yeah. Um, and then even in Queen Shadow, when um, Padme is talking to Bale and um, oh god, what is Bale's wife's name?
Brea,
Brea,
yeah.
and you start to realize that this was in the works well in advance, and so we do see this rebellion forming, but I don't think it's fully realized until this moment in Rogue One, where it is like this is the rebellion that takes down the Empire. Uh, no shade to the Ghost crew, but
Hmm.
um, like this is where I think it
Well,
really changed.
it's an interesting, yeah, and it's an interesting um, shift, and it's very simple and it sounds like an obvious statement, but it took such extremes for this type of vigilance and necessity. I'm not even gonna say willpower,
Mhm.
like just straight up necessity to
Yeah.
actually keep going, and that's definitely what's happening. So we got the Battle of Scarif, uh, awesome, and Rebel bravery and camaraderie. Yeah, so on their way to Scarif, you see uh, even K2SO, interestingly, sort of give off this energy of, I guess, more willingness to cooperate. And then uh, Castian smiles at Jin, and they're on their way to finally go and uh, infiltrate Scarif. And right before this, we also see them solidify the name Rogue One, which is a very cool moment. I would like to just have a part of this podcast. They're stealing a shuttle. Like they steal a shuttle from their entire operation. They're literally
Yep.
Rogue One. And in Bodhi, is it Bodhi who does it? Bodhi
Yeah.
has to scramble for words.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like the Han Solo situation we talked about. Like, what's your name? And the Imperial officer gives him the name Solo. But I mean, I think it's just this spontaneous. Just this is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's something you see, and kind of even on the Battle of Scarif, is as the battle's going down. I know it's kind of jumping forward, but like when a rebel goes down, you often will see another rebel going to the aid of the rebel who was shot, checking up on them or screaming no, like showing emotion. Whereas you have these stormtroopers, they're just getting mowed down, and it is just another set of armor that's fallen. And I think that I think they do a really good job of kind of showing that aspect of it that I don't really think you even get that much in the original trilogy, or even not even in the sequels, where it's like there are those background characters that are just the fodder for the background. And it's like I think in Rogue One you get a lot of characterization when between the rebels and the Empire.
The only instance I can think of that happening in the original trilogy is when one of the Ewoks dies and the other Ewok goes to check on him. It's like, oh no, he's dead. Wake up. That's it. That's the only time.
Way to go, Ewoks.
Yeah, it's very awesome. Yeah, the Battle of Scarif. So they infiltrate the shield with the codes properly. Cassian and Jin get out and into the facility, and they find a map. And Krennic comes along, coincidentally at the same time, and a battle eventually breaks out because they plant C4 or whatever, some bombs, some mines all over, and the bravery and camaraderie is very interesting. And eventually they get some communications to the rebels, and Mon Mothma has this awesome smirk, and they bring some alliance reinforcements. What do you guys think about that sequence that I laid out pretty shoddily, but fine?
I love the shot of Krennic on the top of the tower, and then just like the explosions in the distance.
I was going to say
and everyone's like how are these things blowing? Because it's like one of the most secure Imperial installations is kind of how it's presented. Like there's a giant shield over the entire planet. Yeah. Why are things blowing up?
Yeah.
And it's just Krennic is like
oh, deploy
scramble. What are you doing? I love that shot. It's so good. I do love that Mon Mothma is like. It almost feels like she's like it's finally starting, and like she's like it's actually happening. She's like, we've been doing these little things here and there. We've been fighting these little skirmishes, but she's like, once this happens, and they're like, we're about to steal the plans for the most destructive thing the Empire has ever created. It's happening. It's starting. The real rebellion is starting. And she's like, She's like, yeah, send it all to Scarif. Let's go, baby.
Yeah, like what you were saying, that shot, and then like everyone's just open mouthed, and Krennic's like, "Are we blind? Deploy the garrison, go!" Like,
so
and then when Mon Mothma is informed, and she has that smile, and like I think all at the same time is when like that happens, and then ships arrive. So it's like, oh, now it's a full scale battle all of a sudden.
The battle.
Yeah, so we have the titles. Yeah, go ahead.
I would say the battle, once the fleet kind of shoots in, and then we kind of get these really interesting shots. We get like the blue leader reporting in, gold leader reporting in, and then one thing I noticed when we hear red leader, it's the same sound effects, like perfectly matched what we heard in A New Hope, and that same camera angle of like just the kind of the bust of the pilot, and into like red leader reporting in, and it's like, oh,
Yeah,
let's go, baby.
they had used unused footage and like made it like cleaned it up of those actors.
Hmm.
I'm not sure for how many of the shots, but like those were the actual actors from A New
Oh,
Hope.
I didn't know that. That's awesome. I didn't know that Tarkin was 3D until someone told me. Someone was like, "Oh yeah, did you like the
It's
CG
very
Tarkin?"
good.
And I'm like, "What? I just thought they got a look alike."
I think it was me actually.
Oh, yeah, I think they're right. And I was like,
Yeah, that's
that was fake."
I
Yeah,
remember
no,
feeling bad spoiling that for someone else.
no, I thought it was cool because like they obviously did a really good job. I couldn't tell. Like if I look at it now, I'm like, "Oh, okay, I see it." But now I was like, "Yeah, I thought
If you
that's
look
super
at like the mouth, I never look too far into it. I was having a blast because it's like, all right,
Mhm.
they did a decent job with Tarkin. This is great.
Mm.
Yeah. No, I love the Rebel Alliance coming in. You know, I think that, and just that whole sequence of like the X wings and the U wings and all the ties coming in, the crash onto the shield. Oh man, it's rough, but I'm like, oh wow, that was cool.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you get to see why there's an open spot for Red 5 like pretty quickly.
That's fucked up.
Yeah,
uh,
so the title shift of the Empire winning, would you say is the when Bodhi gets the switch through, but he shortly after gets he dies. Is that
mhm.
to me? I feel
I
like
think
that and Chirrut, that whole situation is when it started feeling like okay, they're succeeding and they're losing.
yeah.
And do you want to go through each character's death, or how do you want to do that?
Yeah, I think we can go through all of them. I think that the shift is really like as more and more of the stormtroopers kind of start deploying, and I think when we see that huge swarm of ties shooting out, it is like, okay,
Oh yeah,
this is this isn't going to end well. But I do love the Hammerhead Corvette, and they're like, how do we blow up the shield? Crash the Star Destroyers. And they just like full engine into the Star Destroyer and crash one Star Destroyer into another. It's very much like, you know, original trilogy move. You know, getting the stormtrooper, getting the Star Destroyers to crash, and I think
that part
that's
is very cool.
when yeah, there's no sound, just the score, and it's something we haven't really touched on. The music in this movie,
It's my favorite score.
oh, it's so good, and it has
Imperial
that like,
Suite.
yeah, it has that feel of the original trilogy, but it's like you'll get these modes and motives going up, and then it changes to something new, and it's like a very familiar but new, and I think they nail it with the score. But yeah, we can,
Yeah,
as it shifts, we lose everyone, so we can definitely. I mean, let's just go down the list and just kind of like the thoughts on the characters. Um,
all I got to say in terms of the sacrifice, because it's it is a sacrifice, and the thing about this type of sacrifice is it's a wartime scenario, and like it's very impactful because they knew what they were stepping into, um, how risky it was, and it's the aspect of martyrdom comes to mind to
yeah.
me, and literally how the only time and place for it is in a wartime scenario. And I often put myself in the shoes of characters,
Hmm.
and it's like I can't relate really because I'm not in a physical war,
Hmm.
but at the same time, a lot of their deaths in this final sacrifice mirror, a lot of emotions that every dang human has, and it's very impactful. And it's like the only time I'd ever be like, I'd calculate, okay, let's do that martyr scenario. But
Yeah.
yeah, Bodhi's is first, yeah, and that grenade. That was massive.
Yeah, it's what's so sad to me about Bodhi is like I think how far he comes. We don't get a lot of Bodhi in the movie. Like he's obviously a pivotal character, but like I think he has the least amount of screen time. Um, and no one really trusts him because he's an Imperial defector. And but he like makes so many things work and so many things happen in this
Right.
movie. He's the one that gets them off the ground, you know, when they're going to Scarif. He's the one that gets them through the gates on Scarif. He had the message of Galen. Like he's so pivotal. And yeah, when that grenade goes into the shuttle when he's on it after, and it's like it's right after one of his accomplishments, like he got the comm array working, and as soon as he's like, yeah, like everything's working out for Bodhi, like he's like hitting all the marks right now. um he's taken away from us, and then it's like almost a snowball effect of we lose Bodhi and we're about to lose everyone else. But yeah, it's all I was like, oh, I remember in the theater watching, and I was like, they're not making it out of this. They all of these people are gonna die. Oh no. um, but yeah,
Yeah, it's each one had their own moment of realizing, oh, I'm going to do this and I'm going to die in the process. Like
Mhm.
um Chirrut Chirrut realizing it, throwing the switch, and then dying shortly after. Baze, you know, going out there to check on him, seeing the ship get blown up because of and knowing it was Bodhi, and being like, okay, I guess I'm gonna go out too. You know.
Mhm.
Yeah, that look over to Bodhi's ship was very impactful. And he starts taking mowing down the death troopers. But that spirit though, that spirit he because he picked up really in it took fight or flight for him to understand what
Yeah.
Chirrut was uh
He
you
starts
know
doing
in
the
his opinion preaching all the time, but what Chirrut was actually doing, you know, with his mind. He's like, oh, that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. Me being intentional with my willpower and my just feel just doing what I have to do and trusting. And
Yeah,
it's very beautiful to me.
yeah.
Baze in specific.
The end of Chirrut and Baze, and to kind of touch on Chirrut for a little bit before we move on to other characters, is Chirrut is a character I've always wanted in Star Wars. And
Mhm.
that is the force aware person, you know, not necessarily the force sensitive or the Jedi Padawan, but the person who knows and understands the force and is essentially an outsider. And uses the force in a way that, you know, um, you could count up to his senses are just so heightened from being blind. You know, even on Jeddah, you know, they use the camera really smart, and you know, you hear we see the boot move in the sand, and then he's like, that's where the boot is. And it's like there is this moment of like, is it the force or is he just that skilled? um and I know it's like a super weird reference, but the novel The Exorcist touches on this of, is it what you think it is or is it something totally else, and does it actually matter at the end of the day, because it was real for the person going through it, and for Chirrut it's real. And Baze is always there being like, oh, the force isn't real. He's got a very Han Solo vibe. um but like at the end of it, it's all that it matters is it's real to Chirrut. And he does so many cool things. Like he shoots the TIE fighter. Like we find out his staff is a like
Mhm.
a blowgun basically, and he shoots a TIE fighter out of the sky with that, which is and it's perfectly landed to go into the platform. Like he does so many amazing
Yeah.
things, says so many amazing things. Everyone learns from Chirrut in one way or another in this movie, and it's one of those things. And there's like a little tiny touch that I love at his very end is he we get this like kind of almost silence, and he says, I'm one with the force is with me, I'm one with the force is with me. And he's walking, and all of the blasters are going by from the Death Troopers, and he doesn't get hit once. And it's like it doesn't matter that he's blind, but when he gets to the console, he feels around for the thing because it's like he is, you don't feel like he's blind at all for most of the movie until
True.
this 1 second.
Yeah.
And it's like at the end of the day, he was a guy who was blind and just felt the force, and then he's taken from us almost immediately after that. And it's like his, outside of Jin and Cassian, his death hit me the hardest.
Mm.
Because it's like he was such a great character. I
Yeah.
love him so
You
much.
Village Bride from Disney Plus. Village Bride had a non Sith, non Jedi Force user, and it's funny. We always talked about non Sith, non Jedi Force users being in Star Wars, and as like something that we want to see more often. And
Mhm.
I mean, sometimes I forget that that is Chirrut, you know, but he's got a staff. You know, he's got a staff and he's blind. He uses his mind and all his capabilities, and no force push or anything. But I think the only thing I want to say about him is, you know, yeah, he's blind, but what does that really mean in the context that he was living? Not much to be distracted by. Like, what is he really gonna do for hobby? I don't think he had an iPhone to listen to music with. I don't think he had, a Neuralink to play Game Boy on in his head. Dude, the dude had, like, what does that do to an individual? You know what I mean? So it's very cool to actually look at Chirrut because he's a massive character. Uh, Especially it's paramount for where we are in Star Wars
Yeah.
history. To I mean, I just agree with everything you said, but that touch though, like, what does blindness really do to somebody? You know?
And one thing about, like, as a small, like, detail that's not in the movie, it's just kind of external media, is there's a kyber crystal at the end of his
I was
staff.
gonna say that.
Mm.
Yeah, if you want to go for it, because I think that's a cool
Yeah,
touch.
talk about that, please.
That I don't know much about it aside from it's in the staff though. Do you know anything more than that, Chase? Because I
Yeah,
don't remember.
that's how he knows where it is at all times.
Hmm.
So in
Oh,
on Jeddah, he says to Jin, "There's a kyber crystal on your neck." It's like, that's a nice necklace. Ha ha ha. There's a kyber crystal on your neck. So even without being force sensitive, you can, like, there is a frequency that all kyber crystals have, and he's in tune with it, and that's how he knows Jin has the necklace, and that's how he always knows where the end of his staff is, and that's how he's able to be so accurate with the staff, is the kyber crystal. He can always sense the frequency of the kyber crystal.
There's also a point where he catches the staff without looking, like,
Yeah.
or maybe he sees it sees it in his peripheral and catches it, but he's not looking in that direction. And
Yeah, he gets the staff thrown to him, and he does a cool spin.
yeah. And there was one other with him. Oh man, I lost it. I don't know.
Yeah. I feel like we could do a whole episode on Chirrut. But yeah, he's one of my favorites, and shortly after, like, we could definitely talk about Baze, and just like, oh man, Baze hits as much as, like, it's definitely the most impactful for me with Chirrut, but Baze hits different when he goes down. For me, I don't know. I'll let one of you guys go if you want to talk about Baze.
Baze was the one that was like, I, I don't want to say heartfelt, but it's like, oh, he's accepting his fate and he's going down, and then he looks over at his friend Chirrut, basically like the look on his face is saying, I'm gonna see you real soon, like within seconds, I'm gonna see you real soon.
The thing that got me the first time I saw this movie, and every time after that, and it's like hard to hold back tears, is Chirrut dies in his arms, and he gets up and he says, "I am one with the Force. The Force is with me." And I'm like, oh my god, oh, that's hard. Because yeah, you're right. He knows exactly what's about to happen, and he's like, you know what? even it's almost like even if he doesn't believe it, it's for Chirrut, you know, because it's like if there's any chance of me being one with the Force with Chirrut, I'm gonna take it now. It's now or never, you know, and I think that's such a like a beautiful moment uh, with Baze,
Mhm.
and he goes out and takes out a bunch of stormtroopers in the process, and it's so good.
Yeah, it really amplifies Chirrut and the situation Chirrut just did.
Hmm.
So
And
I
they were.
mhm. What?
I said, go ahead.
No, I just remembered the little detail. It is outside media, but in the Rogue One novelization, when Chirrut calls Cassian Captain, Cassian has like an inner thought, like, I never told him what my rank was. How does he know what my rank is? Like, that was it. Just little
Oh, that's
details.
cool. That's cool.
Hmm.
But yeah.
Yeah. So we got K2SO, Cassian, and Jin. And K2SO uh, facilitates the ability for Cassian and Jin to get the
Hmm.
plans, which is awesome. And K2SO is impactful in my opinion because he finally realizes how great of an individual Jin is. I think he says the line, um, "You always." Uh, my expectations are always wrong about you, or something like that, and it's a nice little take on you know, he dies shortly after, apparently having a bunch of expectations of an individual, and so he's a droid. But
Hmm.
what does that say? His perspective of her totally shifted, and of his purpose too. I think his purpose was fulfilled. Obviously, should have kept going, but
Yeah, I think the loss of K2 is impactful in its own right. And I think what Rogue One, I don't want to say does it more successfully than Solo did. Um, but you have this Imperial droid giving everything to stop the Empire. Um, and he does
mm,
have his own personality. He was reprogrammed, but what I think is done so well, and again, I don't think Donald Glover did a bad job when Lando loses L3, but when Cassian knows he's lost K2SO, it's like there's not like a super drawn out emotional sequence. It is just like this heavy weight that is just pushed down on Cassian, and you feel it, and it's just like K2SO was his only friend. Um, Everyone else was another soldier or an ally,
mm,
but K2 is his only friend, and it's like Jin had Saw in a way, and Chirrut had Baze, and they had each other, but like you know, Cassian only had K2SO, and then he was gone, and then basically all he's got left is Jin, and he knows what's about to happen. So yeah, I think the death of like K2SO is like so sad, mostly because of Cassian.
Mhm.
yeah,
Um,
brings us to Cassian and Jin, with the entire you know base
the notes are
being blown. What's up?
the the notes are screwed up because the best death hasn't was skipped over. Krennic, Krennic
True.
is the best death of the whole movie.
Yeah.
It's
Uh,
probably the most poetic.
yes, yes.
Yeah. I
Uh,
could. Yeah.
like him, so he gets shot by Cassian, which is great. I love the fact that he doesn't even know who Jin is. That I think is great. He's like, "Who are you?" And it's like,
Yeah.
wow. Like you think about it, like, yeah, he wouldn't know. He hasn't seen Jin since she was 8 or 9 years old, and the fact that how he goes out is he is literally blasted directly by the Death Star. Uh, like, you're right. It's so poetic. Like the thing he wanted to make him important vaporizes him immediately. It's so good. It's my favorite death of all of Star Wars.
Yeah, and I think ultimately he had that fate because he had no purpose, and Jin had a purpose. You know,
Hmm.
of course, I'm boiling it down to simplicity, but really, you look at that whole situation. It's a culmination of that as the foundation of both of their paths throughout the film. You know,
Hmm.
and yeah, killed, shot by your actual enemy, and then obliterated by your higher up who stole your
Yeah.
base. So
Yeah.
it's what he deserved, honestly, because he created it too, because of his
Yeah.
groveling and complaining. But yeah, Cassian and Jin. I mean, how much can we say about that? Really, it's just, I mean, the blinding light from that radiation or whatever. Just their solemnity is awesome to me. You know,
Hmm.
I'm so glad they didn't kiss or anything like that. They just looked at each
Yeah.
other like you're an individual and we just did this and I'm okay
Hmm.
with this. Let's go
Yep.
get incinerated. You know, we succeeded.
I think not only in Star Wars but in fiction in general, like it's almost like this obligation to have this like final kiss or romantic gesture at the end. But like I'm so glad we didn't get that with Cassie and Jin. Like there is a like an intimate moment with them, but it's not like romantic in any way. It is just this
It's existential.
you yeah, you're all I have left and we saved the galaxy together. Just you and I, we did it. Um and it's like you know at the end, you know it's almost like they look at each other like you are the only person that matters in the world to me right now. And they both look at each other like that and they both have that I think that mutual feeling.
One
And go ahead.
one perspective that I heard from Stardust M on TikTok about this is it's not really confirmed, but just the way it's shot, it's like Jin is hugging Cassian, but in such a way that Cassian can't see the blast. So she's like
Oh
protecting
my
him from that.
god.
Oh wow. Damn.
You know, one thing I thought of when I was watching it again today, um, that's just playing that scene in my mind. I'm like, yeah, yeah, no, that is it framed kind of like that, and it ties into how I feel. I was thinking about it today is, you know, she's looking out onto the explosion and being like, I don't have the best words for it, but it's like she was in a way killed by her father, but it wasn't her father's fault. Um, it was the thing that he built took her life. Like the thing that he tried to protect Jin from forever is what ended up taking Jin's life. But in a way, thinking of that, of like hiding Cassian from the blast, of like hiding Cassian from what her father created. Um, and it's like
Yeah.
that is great to
Yeah.
think about. That is awful, awful. I hate it. But it's
Yeah.
so good. Again, this movie's so good.
Yeah. No, her like
But yeah.
Jin and Cassian's character development from this point to up to this point, and like everything you all just said is it's very unique, even in terms of general storytelling and stuff.
Mhm.
So they, any more thoughts on that on all that section?
Um, yeah, I would say that what's so interesting about how we get a moment for every character, right? As we lose the character, we get a moment with them. And I think what's so great is every character, with the exception of Jin and Cassian at the end, and not too much, but they're doing something important right up to the very end. There's no like they were just fighting stormtroopers and one of them got blasted. Like they were all like Bodhi had set up the comm array to get the message out to the alliance, or to set up the connection. And Chirrut was the one who got the panel working, and Baze was the one that was able to save basically Chirrut from going being blasted even more, and then K2 got all of the files ready for them to take and got them up there, and then obviously Cassie and Jin transmitted the plans right um, before they die. And it's like, I think it's really cool that every character was doing something important before they died. Uh, so no one it's like every death felt meaningful. And it's so fast paced too, like how quickly we lose everyone. It's like within less than 5 minutes we lose everyone. I mean, yeah, I think it's great that like everything felt meaningful in that whole sequence.
Yeah, a lot of times with character deaths, I feel like they're just kind of a cheap storytelling device because they don't often
Mhm.
make sense. They're just kind of like, oh, well, let's kill off this character to further the plot. But this is one of the few times where I'm like, every single one of these deaths, the whole sacrifice, all of it makes sense. Like every bit of it. Even though
Yep.
for a while I actually had a silly headcanon where it's like I wanted the Kyber crystal to mean more, so it's like, oh, the Kyber crystal saved Jin and Cassian, and then they retired to a farm somewhere or something, you know. But
You know, I when I first watched this movie and I was like, I had those like what ifs, like, oh, how could they have made it so Jin and Cassian survived, or maybe just Jin survived? Like, what? How could we make that work into the story? You know, but I was like, you know what? It's so much more meaningful and so much more impactful that all of these, every single person that got on that Imperial shuttle, like gave their life
Mhm.
to end the Empire. Um, which I don't think we see a whole lot of in the original trilogy. Like everyone makes it out fine in the original trilogy.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think the only ship that gets away is Leia's ship from that battle. I think.
yeah, there's a
Oh
couple of
wow.
small fighters, and you know, I'll pop this up from Darth Man. Is at the end is when the Star Destroyer shows up when Vader's the exec is that's the executor at that point, isn't it, or no?
I think the Executor is a Superstar Destroyer.
The
I think
Supercharger, yeah. What is he on?
that I think that was the Devastator.
Okay.
I think.
But yeah, that shot is great when that ship comes out of hyperspace and all of the rebel ships just crash into it.
Hmm.
Like that is a like Darth Van said, very menacing, super menacing shot. But yeah, no, the Tantive, you get a
Mhm.
couple like X wings and U wings that shoot out real quick. But yeah, like not many rebel ships make it out. Like the Tantive gets out, and that's about it.
Does the Mon Cal commander who thinks Rogue One, does he get out? The one who downloads the plans on his module?
Radis gets out.
Hmm.
Radis? Okay.
Radis
Yeah,
Radis
yeah.
is in squadrons, if I'm not remembering that incorrectly.
Mm.
Uh, but yeah, he Radis definitely makes it out. Um, he's in a couple books. Um, but yeah, yeah, I do love that shot. And it's like, oh, that's big.
Yeah, it's very menacing. And they escape with the plans, which eventually destroy that thing, the Death Star plans. The hallway, uh, we see all the rebels scrambling to get the plans to safety, and we have the Vader situation and the transition into New Hope. Uh, for me, this was very unexpected, honestly. Uh, Epic. I love Vader's brooding, his brooding stillness and just walking. It's this type of power to me that's very precise and good. Obviously, he's killing people, not very great, but killing rebels who are trying to destroy something that should be destroyed. But I've always wanted to see, more of those types of scenes, not just Vader exclusive, but it that is such a slim chance they had there. I mean, his hand, that
Yeah,
hand, man, through the door. What do you
yep.
guys have to say about all this?
I love the hallway scene. Um, I've heard people don't like the hallway scene and they think it doesn't fit, but I'm like, no.
Yeah.
That's where I'm
I
gonna
think
be
it's
like,
the
yeah,
perfect. perfect
Your
ending.
opinion's actually wrong. No, I love the hallway scene. I think that this is the if we ever talk about the Clone Wars, I can get into my opinions of what they've done with Darth Vader over the years. I'm not a fan of all of it, but I love this because I think Darth Vader in A New Hope is incredibly menacing and incredibly terrifying. And I think as that trilogy goes on, as we kind of go down with Vader and up with the Emperor, we kind of realize, okay, there's, and this is where we get into the whole Anakin is still in there, somewhere. We just have to get him out. But this is when people think Darth Vader, this is what they think of. It's what you thought of as a kid, before the prequels came out. This is what Darth Vader was capable of, and we never saw it until Rogue One. We saw Anakin doing flips and swinging around lightsabers in the prequels, which was cool, but we never got to see Darth Vader being the Darth Vader of our heads. And this is why I love the hallway scene. Is it's just on TikTok you see all the time of like, who would win in a fight, Darth Vader, blah blah blah. And it's like, well, if you look at Darth Vader in the original trilogy, and it's like, yeah, he's menacing, but his lightsaber skills is you, and that's about it. This is just what he does to these rebels is just so brutal. Um, and I love this scene. It is like it makes him the villain, like the real villain we know. So I love it.
Yeah, the whole sequence was like the true exclamation point of the movie, because you pan away from the explosion blossom of Scarif, and even the musical cue in this point is just like really a cool sound, and then the shuttle flies by in frame, like, oh, okay, it moves on to this. And just over the years I have realized so many small details. Like, I didn't realize at first that he's actually using the Force to keep the door stuck.
Oh my god, I didn't even realize. I thought the door was just jammed.
Yeah,
I didn't even think about it. Actually, that's
I don't
funny.
even remember where I got that confirmed, but he's using the Force to keep the door stuck so they can't get through it.
Makes sense.
And I think he turns off his chest panel so that he's completely concealed in the dark. And then when he turns the lightsaber, everything turns on, and then he goes to work. And then the very end, this is also a headcanon that I agree with. Someone saying that when he's standing out in the vacuum of space and his cape is flowing, that he's using the Force to do that, because capes don't that doesn't happen in outer space.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
That's
Just to flaunt,
that's,
just to look
that's
cool.
that's some moon conspiracy business.
He likes his tricks.
He is very extra.
It's still
Vader is
Anakin Skywalker at the end
Yeah.
of the day. That is such an Anakin move of like, yeah, let's push the cape back.
That's true. That's true. That's a good headcanon. But yeah, transition to New Hope. We see, if you haven't seen the movie, I'm going to spoil probably the biggest thing, Princess Leia. I am all for it. I don't pay attention to Star Wars trends whatsoever, but to me, it's very impactful. I think, especially growing up and in certain aspects of my adulthood, I thought hope was like fleeting and useless. But I mean, this whole movie really facilitates an understanding that hope is really just willpower in the mind. And of course, some hope can be baseless and like not fruitful. But if you add Galen, Urso, and Jin and a bunch of rebels and some actual clarity, it's going to be something good. And like you guys said, Leia's the embodiment of that. So I am all for the ending with Leia.
Yeah.
What about you guys?
Yeah, it's a seamless transition into episode 4, and I'm usually a big believer in watching Star Wars in release order, but I would argue you could actually put Rogue One first instead, because it just goes right into episode 4 so nicely.
Yeah. There is I know you say you don't pay attention to Star Wars trends, but there is a new trend going around of like people saying like, if you want to get people into Star Wars, they've never seen Star Wars, start with Rogue One. And every time I watch it, that solidified even more of like, I think,
Makes sense.
yeah, I think Star Wars is very much in the zeitgeist of Western culture at this point, and in fact, global culture more than anything. Most people you ask on the street that I would say are probably over 10 years old know what who Darth Vader is. Like Darth Vader is the bad guy from Star Wars. Like that is just I think a very well known thing in popular culture. You may not know who he is or who Luke or Han is, but like someone like Darth Vader is very iconic. You know what a lightsaber. Most people know what a lightsaber is, um, and I think that Rogue One sets up the story of Star Wars perfectly. Um, I think that you get everything that Star Wars is about in this one movie, and obviously it is capped off with the lightsaber of like okay, so we have this like it's called Star Wars. It's a war movie. There will be a war. There will be battles, and you see that there are spaceships, and you know there's this thing called the Death Star, and it's this big. And what I think is so cool about the movie is like when we see the Death Star, it is often a moon in the distance,
Mhm.
and which ties into like oh that's just a small moon, and so I think they do that. I think they show the Death Star really well. Um, and so, yeah, I think this is the perfect starting point at this point for anyone who's trying to get into Star Wars is like watch Rogue One first. I think Star Wars talks on TikTok, like the older guy that's just really positive about Star Wars. He says, if you don't like it, then because there's no like, well, what happens next? It's like this is
Mhm.
a complete story. This is done. There's no like, well, what happens to Jin? Well, Jin's gone. You
Yeah.
know, everyone's gone. There are characters that are going to keep the story going, and then it's like, if you want to know what's next, I'll show you what happens right after this. So yeah, I think that this is like the perfect starting movie for Star Wars. Um, so good. This movie's so good.
Mhm. Yeah, the ripple effect it had across the saga, in my opinion, is that it raised the bar. And I would say that I don't think it can actually be topped. But it's
Mhm,
so unique that it doesn't really have to be. That concept is not something I like in the first place. But I
mhm,
mean, like, I can't imagine being J.J. Abrams or what's his name, Ryan Johnson, making the films that came after this. Like,
mhm.
yeah, I think it probably put pressure on them in certain aspects. I'm not even a film buff. I don't even think about that aspect, but I just thought about it now, and it's so monumental in my opinion. It probably put
Yeah.
pressure on directors.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any like behind the scenes like interviews or anything like that. I don't pay too much attention to those things, but I think you're right. There's with the I think it was just a successful film overall. Like it was. I don't want to say universally liked, but it had really good reception critically and amongst the audiences. Um, it was it's just a good movie and it is a good Star Wars movie and it's very much in the original trilogy, which is what most people associate Star Wars with. Um, and I think there is like a what do we learn from Rogue One that we can take moving forward? And I think where that really took off was the Mandalorian. Um,
Mhm.
and how the Mandalorian really kind of panned out, I think had a lot to do with how Rogue One, turned out. Um, and I think even like if we talk about ripple effect across the saga, I think we kind of get more nuance if we look into like the prequel trilogy. We get more nuance with Bail, Organa, and a little bit with Mon Mothma, and just like them having the Republic going into the rebellion and then to the Alliance and then to the New Republic. I mean, even just like this, you see these little effects of like when Bale says, "I need to get to Alderaan now."
Mhm.
It's just like, oh no. But we see what Jin and Cassian and Chirrut and Baze, Bodhi and K2SO did is going to set the stage now at this point sets the stage for Luke, Han, and Leia and Rey, Finn, and Poe. Um, and what the rebellion does and what the resistance does moving forward. It really does set the stage for that perfectly, in my humble opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have much else to say. I don't think. I
Yeah.
could make like an insane person rant about some of the aspects, but I said all the aspects that I wanted to comment on. It's,
Mhm.
I mean, it's just, it never gets old actually, and I don't think I've ever watched
Yeah.
this and felt like that. That's the last thing. I mean, I've never watched it and felt like, I can do
It's
something else and lurk, but
the
always
one
just,
thing the one thing that I think is so impressive about this movie to me is the emotional weight never feels less every time I watch it.
Hmm.
Like, I think it's the most emotional Star Wars movie. I think it's the most like heavy-hearted Star Wars movie. It's the saddest Star Wars movie. And that feeling never goes away no matter how many times I watch this movie.
Yeah. No, it's a really it, it's a really easy movie for me to watch in such a way that like the emotional impact is never lessened. However, it's almost like a weird comfort movie. Like I can put it on the background or I could sit down and watch it, but I probably now at this point it has rivaled how many times I've seen Return of the Jedi, and I've seen Return of the Jedi over
damn,
100 times easily.
Wow.
damn.
This is so I live with a handful of roommates, and this is like the one Star Wars movie I'm always like, you want to watch Rogue One? Does anyone want to watch Rogue One with me? It's a really good movie. But no, I have watched this movie several times now outside of the theater. Um, it doesn't rival A New Hope for me, which is what I've seen the most. Uh, but it's up there. Like, I think A New Hope, Force Awakens, and Rogue One should be, and maybe Phantom Menace are the movies I've seen the most. Um, but yeah, like, it's just Rogue One. Every time I watch it, I'm just like, this never gets old. It's the only movie I think that I feel like the same way I feel about A New Hope, is like, I don't think I will ever grow tired of this movie. Um, like, I love all the Star Wars movies, but there's some that, there's just some that I prefer to watch, over others most of the time. And A New Hope and definitely Rogue One are those two movies for me now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I
where
think
where
my
does
go-to for Star Wars is the.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Doesn't really matter, but Empire Strikes Back, this and Revenge of the Sith probably. Yeah,
Yeah.
where does this fall for your rewatch? Number one. Go,
Number one.
David.
Number two, but only because I cannot bring myself to knock Return of the Jedi out of number one.
I cannot wait
Cool.
until we talk about Return of the Jedi. I love Return of the Jedi. Least favorite Star Wars movie.
That's great.
um,
I love those opinions.
this is number two for me, and it's I randomly, like a couple weeks ago, rewatched A New Hope again. I just put on the pre-special edition version, and I'm just like, this is my favorite Star Wars movie. I need to stop lying to myself and saying that Empire Strikes Back is my favorite movie. Empire Strikes Back is a solid number three for me. Rogue One is number two for me, for sure. Like, the top three is definitely A New Hope, Rogue One, Empire Strikes Back. Uh, I think there is always an immense amount of
Awesome.
nostalgia that'll keep A New Hope up there for me. Uh, but man, I love Rogue One so much, so much. But yeah, any final thoughts
Outro.
on? Yeah, any final thoughts? Or this is the shortest episode I think we've ever done.
If you haven't watched Rogue One, uh, do it. No,
Do it
I think
now.
it's short because we did the different.
Yeah, breaking it, not breaking
Find
it
me
down.
on Higo27 on YouTube. My Wi-Fi's messed up.
Uh oh. Yeah, you can find me at Forward into the Black pretty much everywhere on TikTok, Twitch, Now I'm on Instagram, or now I'm on Twitter, unfortunately. But yeah, David, where can we find you?
I am Xanatos1138 pretty much everywhere as well, primarily on TikTok. I am at some point in my life going to try and do Twitch streaming again, but I'm the same name there too anyway. But yeah, that's me.
Nice. Darth Man gives Rogue One an 8 out of 10. Incorrect. It's a 10 out of 10. All Star Wars movies are 10 out of 10. But no, thank you guys for watching. Thanks for people that dropped by, and thank you two for hanging out and talking about such a great Star Wars movie.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was a good time.
All right. Thank you for tuning in. What is it? For light and for life. We're all the Republic, and may the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you.